So my premise here in all of this is that we're in a new era of empowered and networked audiences. And what I mean by that is the traditional purchase funnel has essentially been blown to bits by the explosion of digital and social media. People now, and consumers in particular, bounce between what we would describe as traditionally as very much controlled and curated corporate communications, which are typically one-way. They bounce between that and a much more chaotic peer-to-peer communications. So if you think about the classic purchase funnel being, awareness, consideration, preference, acquisition, and then ultimately some sort of loyalty or advocacy, you now have a very chaotic situation where people may see a tweet, they may go online and read reviews if it's about a brand or a product, and then and only then may they see the ad, and they may actually never have seen it on TV. They would have seen it online or on YouTube. So you have a situation where the power has shifted towards the consumer, and frankly, they no longer want to play by the rules that we've all used in the past and that we're familiar with, which tends to make us feel overwhelmed as marketers and executives. So, so while this whole era of connectivity and the data that is created by this connectivity can, in fact, help us build our businesses and scale them, it creates a lot of noise. And such as it is, that's the idea from the presentation, is that the noise can increase complexity, diminish our control, which is sort of a scary thing as business executives and especially as marketers, and often lead to withdrawal. When I say that, what I've heard many in the past say is, look, there's so much noise and there's so much complexity that I'm going to do what I can and leave the rest for another day. And my premise is that too many companies are taking much too little advantage of this world, and it's stifling growth. It's stifling the growth of everything from our businesses to capital markets to even the economy. And the data has power, but if you don't use it, then you're just creating a tremendous amount of waste. So I believe that businesses need new models and people to help them figure out how to find the signal through all this noise and take advantage of this connected world. So while I'm going to be talking about these three models and focusing here.
Right. Here's another one from a listener regarding intent-based content. Is there a particular format that, in your experience, is better at signaling through the noise than other formats? And the writer mentions rich media. Is that something, in other words, that stands a better chance of cutting through?
Yes. Look, I think, as I mentioned, and the reason why TV is, as much as, Twitter bought a company, Bluefin Labs, that, and you've seen a bunch of acquisitions recently where, even big TV advertisers have now figured that unless they can figure out how people are actually engaging with their ad and moving away from just consumption metrics like Nielsen towards engagement metrics, that they're probably wasting a lot of money as well. But the reason why I mentioned TV tends to be sort of treated separately is you ultimately could benefit from using sight, sound, and motion and rich media to build a brand. And yes, rich media is something that can break through. You have to. The thing about rich media, though, is you have to tag it. The easy, you can use some very rudimentary sort of semantic analysis if you're just dealing with text, because you can read it. It's obviously much more difficult to read rich media. So if you're thinking about content and intent-based content in rich media form, you need a good tagging mechanism to say, this is what this piece of content's about. This is how people are, so that we can understand how people are engaging with it and consuming with it.
Right. Here's, I think, an interesting question. Organizationally, who needs to be on this team, whether it's a marketing team or or otherwise that actually executes against these models?
Yeah, great question, and there's no one answer. We've seen it. It's new, right? And so a lot of these things end up being, handed over part-time to people who don't have the time to do it or whatnot. A few things, though. It's got to have executive support. This is not something that can go from the ground up because you're really dealing with, in these cases, models that need multiple people from the organization to work together. You need to start to think about the data you have in different ways. And what we've found is that senior executive level really needs to get behind it and sponsor it, because the success of it really depends on pulling people together from different parts of the organization. So you need that kind of sponsorship. So research, business intelligence, marketing for sure. If a social media department has been carved out separately, that's important. And then you've got all the, if it's in the content business, all the people who are responsible for creating and prepping and tagging that content. So in some ways, we sort of think of it as to the first question or the second question, the bigger cost here may be just needing to change the way you to do things internally as opposed to the external direction.